INFJs and INFPs. My mom is an INFP and I am an INFJ. My INTJ sister got us to take a personality test like 12 years ago, and my mom tested as an INFJ. So I originally, upon getting into the whole thing, thought that she was in the same personality group. I had noticed some similarities, but I eventually got to a point about 2 years later, since I hadn't really, been getting into it. I was pretty happy with the INFJ description because previously, I guess a few years before that, I'd read a book about introversion and extroversion, which was entirely different than what you hear. They say the extroverts are bold, introverts are timid, and introverts are not people, or don't have people skills, and extroverts do, or whatever. And that doesn't turn out to be true, since some extroverts really aren't people, and some introverts are, and then timid and bold is pretty much dependent upon the person. But anyway, so then I read the INFJ thing, and that was a lot more specific than the introversion extroversion thing. So I was thrilled, and I really didn't think about whether my mom was this or that or the other. I just noticed some similarities, and I just went with that. But about 2 years later, my INFJ brain had accumulated enough things, and I was actually in the middle of I don't know if my mom was worried about something or worked up about something, and I was trying to calm her or help her out with it or whatever. And I was saying things that to me as an INFJ would help me, would make me feel better. And they were having exactly the opposite effect on my mom. And that is the point that I realized that, guess what? There is no way that we are the same type. And so I started looking it up, and I watched quite a few videos on YouTube about the difference between INFJs and INFPs. And sure enough, my mom was an INFP. Some of the things that I remember that stood out to me and helped me to realize that were, one, INFPs, well, according to socionics, they're a judger, so they come to conclusions a lot quicker than an INFJ does. INFJs will just keep watching and trying to get that one little last bit of information before they come to a conclusion. Whereas INFPs have no problem at all just coming to a conclusion immediately, and that's a huge difference. Another thing was that, on the conclusions that they come to, I think that INFJs have a higher percentage of right conclusions, but that INFJs and INFPs probably have the same amount of correct conclusions and all. It's just that for INFPs, it's a lot easier for them to change their conclusions, so that's why they're able to come to it so easily. And it's a huge advantage in some things and a disadvantage in others, just like everything. And the other thing that I remember is that, INFPs are, it's no big deal for them at all to tell people what they like, what they don't like, what they think, what their opinion is about all this stuff, to share their values with all kinds of people. My mom does it in the grocery store, like, all the time. Anybody that she meets, she's sharing values. And for an INFJ, we don't do that so readily. We have to kind of know the person a little bit first. And so there are some other things too. Well, they're a lot more easily distracted than INFJs are. INFJs are a lot more focused. Anyway, INFJs and INFPs they do have some things, as I said, it seemed that we have some things in common. And those things are, an INFJ has NI for their very first function. And the INFP has it for their sixth function. So maybe it's kind of like their second strongest function. And maybe their whole personality is, you know, even based upon it, and they understand it like innately, I think. So this NI is just pretty obvious on them. You know, when you're looking at pictures, you can mistype them for INFJs, although INFJs don't really show their NI so readily in a picture. It's usually the FE. But, so they have the NI pretty strong, and so do we. And then they have the FI for their first function, and we have FI for our sixth function, which makes it pretty strong. So our first two functions are the same ones, you know, not in the same order, but so superficially at least it does seem like we have a lot in common. Another thing that I remember seeing that about INFPs is that that's different from INFJs. And again, well, I've read that this can vary according to the Enneagram on an INFJ, but the INFPs can, generally be speaking, be more like the stereotypical INFJ than an INFJ. They will help the world, you know, like one person at a time, whereas an INFJ is more likely to study and learn the whole social structure and try to change the social structure and thus help people. So that's another huge difference. I know my mom will just, you know, talk with the bad boy, talk with everybody, you know, just, oh, you know, she'll just be like, I made the day better and feel like she's successful, whereas I would probably feel guilty. Sometimes I do talk to people, it just depends, you know, if we kind of click or hit it off or whatever, but I really kind of have to concentrate on what I'm doing, or I'll probably like leave my card there or something. But she can kind of divide it in her mind and keep one thing in one section and one thing in another section. And I would probably feel guilty if I was going around doing that to everyone, because I would be like, well, I can't follow up on everyone, so I'm being like insincere, or, you know, I wouldn't really feel like I was making a difference just talking to them that one time, making that day better. I would feel more like I needed to like make their life better, you know. So anyway, INFJs are together in a group with ESTPs, ISTJs, and ENFPs. So in our subconscious, we have the ESTP, and then we have in the unconscious we have the ENFP, and then our superego, which, like, I haven't really studied that. I'm not sure exactly what that entails, but we have the ISTJ there. And all the other ones that I just mentioned, they all have the other one somewhere in there. So then you have another group, which is the INTJs and the ESFPs and the ENTPs and the ISFJs. So that's 2 different groups, and that's 8 of them, right? And all of those are actually perceivers. And perceivers, we have the feeling and thinking functions in the middle. So your functions that you have on the outside are ones that you don't really have very much control over them. Like, sometimes you control them and sometimes they control you. So we really rely on the ones in the middle to give us our stability. How the INFPs are in one of the other 2 groups that are judges. And basically, how this works out is, for example, if an INFP is like worked up about something, and you're like trying to calm them or trying to make them feel better or whatever, if it's just a small matter, or maybe a medium small matter, maybe even as much as a medium large matter, medium-sized matter, you can still use, because we try to use our feeling and thinking functions in this kind of situation, because those are our stable functions, right? You can still use those to help, you know, calm an INFP until it gets to maybe a medium-sized function. After that, forget it. There's no traction, shall you say, because they don't have, those are their functions that they don't really have control over, and you just kind of have to leave them alone and come back and reason with them at another time when they are calm. But they're put together entirely differently, and we have, for our feeling and thinking functions, we have kind of a delicacy and a the nuances and the subtleties and all that sort of thing in with those functions. But with the judgers, those are on the outside. They, sometimes it controls them, sometimes they control it. And it's just really very different. I can compare it to our SE, for example. I can't really talk about the NI because out of the perceiving functions, that's like in your subconscious, is it? And it's my first one, so it's kind of hard to see it objectively. But if you look at the SE, and like myself and INTJs, and also in the SE DOMs, we play pretty rough with the SE. With my dad, the ESTP, if you're like trying to be friendly or whatever, you just kind of bump into him sometimes, or that sort of thing. You do that with my mom, and it's like a moral insult. Like, why are you being so rough with me? And you're not really being rough, like you barely touched her, like you don't like hurt her or anything, but we're pretty rough with our SE, and it's not something that it's kind of a game, and we're kind of letting off tension because of what we experience with it. The SE is kind of rough with us. So we're kind of letting off tension because this is something that we don't really feel like we have a lot of control over sometimes, and that sort of thing. And it's not meant to be taken literally. It is saying something, but it's not a literal message. And that's the way that it is with the judgers, with their feeling and thinking functions. So you could kind of say it mildly that they're awkward in those functions, or you could say, to put it more strongly, they can even maybe seem abrasive or insensitive or harsh, unceremonious about those functions. It's not necessarily a bad thing. They'll just even do this with each other. It really depends on the person and what is intended and the motive and everything, but just personality wise, they do this with each other, and it doesn't really mean anything. There was an INFP that communicated something that seemed pretty dark and depressing. I was kind of concerned about them, and I was like, hey, I'll ask my mom, the INFP. And since people assume that other people are like they are, whatever her response is probably going to be the right one. So I told her about this, and she's like, oh, they're just trying to get attention. And you're like, just trying to get attention. They just they jerk your chain pretty hard on feelings and thinking things, and it's just part of what they experience themselves personally, and it's just the way it is. My mom met someone in the store the other day, and she actually gave the person her name and everything. And so this lady, my mom found out that this lady had a daughter the same name as my mom's name, and so this lady felt better talking to my mom, and my mom felt good because she talked to her and made the lady feel better, this sort of thing. Obviously, if like that happened to me, I would talk to the person, and make them feel better and everything, but like I would probably feel pretty like, oh, man, that's horrible, like maybe depressed me that day or something, but to her, no. They don't have that that wince factor to the feelings and thinking things like we do. I was talking to an INTP the other day. It's kind of refreshing because they just put things bluntly. Like, you don't have to mess with all the little in between points of the feeling and the thinking. They just say it however it is, and that really is how you have to be with them. You kind of have to be unceremonious about it. If they ask if you want something, just say, maybe you're gonna want to go into da 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 da, but they're just thinking, I just want to hear yes or no. You just say no, yes, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, that looks like fun, it's really different dealing with the judgers because they seem kind of bifurcated because they're feeling and thinking you're expecting them to be together, and they're like, forked. And they can seem pretty extreme in those functions just because they don't really have control over them necessarily all the time, and so they can seem both extreme in the actual cognitive function by itself, and also in going back and forth between their feeling and thinking because they're on the edges like that. If you look at an ISTP, like one minute they'll be super analytical, and the next moment they'll be like really friendly. So it can go back and forth really quickly, and it seems, you know, very odd to a perceiver, but that's just how they roll. INFPs can be like really up and optimistic and kind of childlike in their approach to life. You know, it definitely like makes you feel better, and they say that they I've heard it said that they really experience the experience of living physically more than any other type. I think it's true. My mom is always extremely cautious of her personal comfort. She has a little checklist, and she's like, things, it's not good right now. I need a bathroom, I'm hungry, and I'm tired. So we need to do something. And she's always, you know, going back and forth with the thermostat, you know, putting it up 1 degree, down 1 degree, up 1 degree, down 1 degree. She knows exactly how her comfort level is at any moment. I think that her feeling and thinking functions, because they're not so controlled, will pull her along, and then she'll forget about the comfort thing sometimes. And, you know, like I've heard so many times, oh, no wonder I'm hungry. I haven't eaten anything yet today. You know, so I think that just her TE, she'll get going on a project or whatever, and it'll just carry her along, or some feeling that she's having will carry her along also. I mean, it's just really funny how you can have the same results for different reasons, because I would maybe forget about this sort of thing, but just because I don't really sense my SI very much sometimes, you know what I'm saying? It's also like, you know, my mom was always saying she has a one-track mind, and so she can't really, dog is whining to get in, so she can't really concentrate, and you can't really like distract her like when she's in the middle of doing something, because she can't, it's hard for her to get back to it. Whereas for me, it's difficult for me to get distracted, because I'm just so deep into it. I'm so focused. You know, I was reading a book in a car one time, and somebody told me that someone got mixed up and almost like opened the car door. I didn't even notice. So yeah, you can have the same results for like different reasons sometimes. I heard an INFP that makes videos, and I don't want to say who, because maybe I will be misrepresenting what they said, and I don't want to cause some problems, but he was saying that INFPs and INFJs can like either go more in the feeling or the thinking direction. Like, I don't think it's literally true, but I do see that sort of thing, because I will be talking about, you know, facts or whatever, and my mom will be like, only one more fact, I don't feel like thinking anymore. And this is a very common thing. But then I have an INFP friend, I don't know her really well, but she'll like talking about science and all that stuff. So something about SI people that I've noticed with her and with ENFPs, I haven't made a thorough investigation of all the different types to see this, but they, hold on just a second, I'm going to close the door. The dog opened the door. Is that because they have the SI, they really don't have a lot of presence naturally, and they're very sensitive about not being noticed sometimes, and so you have to pretty much give them your undivided attention when they're talking, and do not interrupt. Like, they take it to heart so bad if you interrupt them. You know, for me, if I'm, you know, participating in the conversation and like saying stuff and everything, then that means I'm engaged, and that means that I'm giving you my entire attention, and I will like purposely do that, and it's a compliment, you know what I'm saying? But just don't do it with an INFP or ENFP. Just don't. Just put it into monologue mode in your mind. To them, it's not a monologue, but maybe to you it is. This could be not just even, some culture could play into that as well. I don't know, but yeah, they'll even cry sometimes. You interrupt them. INFPs can be really cautious. They have the NI, so they'll be able to tell you all the different things that could possibly happen. Trying to think if there's anything else noteworthy that I wanted to mention. I heard an INFJ that makes videos saying that, you know, you kind of have to leave them alone to do their own thing, and you do your own thing. And That's true. I think that's true with kind of probably all the judging types somehow. You know, the INFPs can have that ESTJ come out, and they're not happy just doing something themselves the way that they want it done. Sometimes they really want to make you also do it in the way that they want it done. They have to include someone else in it also. So, like I said, you just kind of have to be unceremonious and be like, nope, I don't want to do this. And I saw an ENFP video about ESTJs because I was kind of trying to get a handle on what it is that's kind of difficult to deal with about them. And she's like, you can tell them I don't want to do this or whatever, and they'll leave you alone for that day, and then the next day you have to do it again. So, you know, I saw an INFJ one time that said that they were in the car and with someone, and they were driving, and that they were obviously listening to something on the radio. They're obviously listening to the song, and the person beside them went and changed the channel. They're like, what do I do? And it's just like, we'll just switch it back and act like nothing happened. So, you know, you just have to be unceremonious like that with the judgers. Just don't let it take it personally or let it get to you or whatever. It's just the way that they are. And if they do something, just throw it right back at them. You know, you're a chameleon, being an INFJ, you can reflect things back and just do it. Like, sometimes you think too long. If you leave that cigarette ash sitting on your arm while you're thinking about it, you're going to get hurt. Sometimes you just have to throw something right back. And that's also a good thing with like any type, but also like, you know, with judgers, it's kind of maybe harder to read them because there's that huge difference there. And if you're in doubt about whether they mean something in a certain way or not, maybe just do it back and see what they do. Of course, I think that judgers aren't quite as consistent as perceivers. Maybe a lot of times they don't realize how they're coming across. So in that case, it would just, you know, work to demarcate your boundaries and to show them how they're coming across. Because honestly, like, they don't realize sometimes, a lot of times. And you kind of have to redefine your idea of closeness with them, because you're accustomed to thinking of it as a certain way with feeling and thinking and getting into great distinctions and you know, all the nuances and everything, and sharing those. And it's not going to be able to happen with a judger. They are looking for the nuances in the sensing and the intuitive functions. So, you know, you're still going to be close, and you just have to redefine your idea of closeness, because somehow you're not going to mesh like the way that you're expecting to. It's a different kind of meshing. But as I said before, you know, it really is kind of a break. You don't have the wins factor with them, you know what I'm saying? That this just like, oh, it's just an emotion, yeah, and they don't treat it as like, oh no, maybe I'm gonna wound them for life, you know, kind of thing. I don't know. They don't get into all these finer distinctions and everything. Oh, that's one other thing. The INFPs, because of their NE, I guess, they are really like either this or that. They don't really see all the other things there. So, I mean, you might have to kind of, I guess, maybe that is it's the same. I'm sure there's a lot of distinctions in any that I don't know about, but you know, saying that is a distinction, that they have nuances and everything in their intuitive functions. They do, and I'm not. I don't know enough about the NE to be able to talk about the distinctions, but I'm just saying that they have a either or kind of thing. People are either good or bad. You either did this with this motive or that motive, and they can kind of get stuck going back and forth between